All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the, what day is it? September 26th, Community Investment Fund 2030 meeting. Before we start, we're just going to do a quick roll call. And if I miss anybody, please let me know. If there's a substitute for a commissioner, please let us know as well. The co-chairs, myself is here, Senate President Looney. I see Senator Duff, Representative Rojas, Senator Kelly, Representative Candelora. Is Senator Moore here? Senator Moore? I saw Representative Napoli, Secretary Beckham is here. Commissioner Reeves, Commissioner Barton Reeves, online maybe.
Online, Mr. Speaker, I am here.
Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Thank you.
Woman here. All right. Commissioner Mascara Bruno, saw her earlier. Commissioner Dom is here. Is anyone here from the Attorney General's office? Yes. Good. How are you? Yep. Is Treasurer Russell? I haven't seen him. All right. Kevin Alvarez from Treasurer Russell's. Comptroller Scanlon's office.
Tara Downs, Deputy Comptroller.
Welcome. We'd rather have you than the Comptroller. So Secretary of State Thomas is here. Senator McCrory, Representative Felipe, I think I saw him. Yes, over there. And we have Chief of Staff to the Governor, Johnny Dock. And I think that's it. With that, any comments from my co-chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just that once again, this was a competitive process since we have begun this CIF proceeding. My understanding is that there were almost $700 million worth of applications for this round, of which we're recommending funding of 101 million today. So for those who are on this list, congratulations. For those who are still pending, there'll be other rounds and other opportunities to perfect your application.
Thank you. No comments on my end. Does anybody else have any comments just generally before we get going? No? Okay, approval of the minutes from the June 12th, 2023 meeting. You'll find the prior minutes in your packet. And if there's no questions on the minutes or suggested revisions, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. So moved by Senator Duff. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Looney. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. The minutes are approved. Now we're on to agenda item number 4 under new business, subsection A, approval of CIF change request policy. There's an attachment to describe it. I'm looking at the Commissioner Dom and she will explain it. Thanks.
Perfect. And then before that, I just wanted to mention that I think Eleanor Michael is here from DAS online. And then Matt Brockman from the governor's office are both members of CIF.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have the unenviable task this morning of describing a somewhat complicated administrative procedure here. But just to take a step back, we've gotten a lot of requests for changes to projects that were approved in round 1 or 2. We've actually gotten 13 requests for changes over the last just couple weeks or couple months. And so it became a problem. Just the basic obvious reason why this is a problem. We are spending a lot of staff time on reviewing these changes and figuring out if they're big, if they're small, if they're real, if they're necessary. That's staff time we could be evaluating about future applications. It's also a problem because you all review these applications really carefully when you go to approve them in round 1 and 2. And then if they come back significantly different in the future, you know, what are you approving? Are you approving X or are you approving X minus a significant chunk? So we want to address these in a fair way that makes it so that everyone knows they're going to be treated the same way if they need to change their project. It minimizes staff time. It minimizes board time because we don't want to waste your time reviewing the same project twice. And we want to make sure that we incentivize projects to actually apply for the thing that they are going to build. We understand things change a little and you'll see an accommodation in this policy for small changes, but we really want to incentivize projects, applicants to put together the closest thing that they think is to the real project that they're actually going to be able to build. And if that means they have to wait till the next round, wait till the next round. So to the extent that you all are out there talking to your constituents, this is largely the legislative side of the room I'm seeing, Senator McCrory. It's the extent that you're talking to your constituents and you're talking to municipalities, we really want to encourage people, button up your applications because there will not be an easy, just quick change. We're going to swap this in for out, swap something in and out. So that's the overall setup for today of why we think we need to put together a pretty complicated, a pretty rigorous process for how to deal with changes. That all being said, I'm going to jump into the slides. Thank you. Any questions to start with? So for change requests, couple things to take away from this slide. Any request that requests additional funds is going to have to come back to the board. So that's just a basic premise. If you are asking for more money, no, we can't do that without coming back to the board with a full application, a new application. I'm going to skip the second bullet and go to the third bullet. Any change where you're suggesting something that is different from what was on the bond commission agenda, what was in the language, obviously has to go back to the bond commission. Again, if you're moving the location, if you're doing something wildly different, clearly that has to go back to the bond commission. The second bullet here, we're trying to make a distinction between projects that have a substantial change and something more minor that maybe the commissioner or that, so we're making a distinction between minor and substantial changes. A substantial change is defined as something that results in a 20% reduction in either the scope, the outcomes, or the leverage funds, i.e. the funds that are coming in from the outside. Also, a substantial change is anything that creates a funding gap. So these substantial changes, we'll get to on the next couple slides how we treat the substantial changes, but I just want to make sure we're all clear that we're saying, if you're coming back to us with something that's less than 20%, you know, you are going to be able to do 10% fewer units or serve 10% fewer patients. That's what we're calling a non-substantial change. 20% is where we drew the line in the sand of saying, if you're moving more than 20%, we really need to treat that as a major change to what you said you were going to do from the beginning. Next slide. Okay, so this flow chart talks about what happens if you are requesting a change before we've even executed a contract between DECD and the project. So this would mean we're pretty early on. We've probably only been a couple months since the last CIF board meeting. You probably didn't write your application that long ago. And so we want to treat these projects, we're saying these are slightly different from the ones where we have already executed a contract. So looking at the chain up at the top, you submit a change request to us, we review it, we decide whether it's substantial or non-substantial based on the definition I just described. If it's not substantial, DECD is going to make a recommendation, and we're proposing that the commissioner can just have discretion. These are these 10% cases. If it is substantial, it's more than 20%, or it creates a funding gap, we're suggesting that that just automatically get deallocated and that the project have to reapply. Seems possibly harsh, but think about it. These are before you've even executed a contract. So these people are probably a couple months from when they actually submitted the application. And this is exactly what we're trying to discourage, is projects changing significantly right after they submitted the application, because it's just irresponsible on the part of the applicant. So I'm going to pause there. Any questions on this workflow? Yeah.
When you say commissioner discretion, what is that discretion over? Does that mean they can choose to deallocate completely, or do they just choose for the project and then go the way of a substantial change?
No, this proposal is that commissioner, or I, we use the commissioner's discretion, that if it's a non-substantial change, I could decide whether it's too significant, even though it's only that 10%, it's sort of irresponsible or is problematic in some other way. So I could say, no, this is not going to fly, come back with a new application. It's just too much of a change. Or I could say approved, go forward. So that would mean complete discretion between those two options.
But if you choose to deallocate, it could still come back.
What do you mean by come back?
Like they can reapply.
They can reapply,
All right.
for sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry.
Senator Moore?
Sorry.
He's such a gentleman. Thank you. Just for clarity, this is a project that has been a lot of the money, but not actually been awarded the money. The money hasn't been received by the organization. So if a project had started and you've given them part of the money and they're falling short, what would be different in that situation?
Great question. That's the next slide. So I'm happy to go there unless, okay.
Senator Duff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. How many, I guess for the first two rounds, did you say kind of how many fall in each category?
Out of the 13 that are coming to us, at least 10 of them, well, I'll just let Matt answer before I say the wrong thing.
Mr. Pugliese, do you mind yeah, thanks, Mike.
So 7 of them would fall under the commissioner discretion right now. They're less than the 20%. 2 of them are technical changes. So that would have to come back to the board. They're on the agenda for later this meeting and go back to the State Bond Commission. And then 2 or 3 of them have unfunded budget gaps that have emerged since we made the award significant, which is a substantial change. And 1 is trying to completely change the project and it's becoming ineligible.
Okay.
So 4 would be substantial changes that would be automatically de-allotted according to this policy, 4 out of the 13.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question. Is there a mechanism, I know with the commissioner's discretion, is there a mechanism to report that or just discuss that here at some point in the future in a report so that we know kind of where things stand, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't think we mentioned that. I don't think we proposed that here, but we could propose a notification, like at the next board meeting, we come to you with a list of changes that have been made by commissioner's discretion and make sure that, or in real time, if the board would prefer, we could send that out in real time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, I think one question of mine would be when let's say you deallocate a project, substantial change, and the board has no desire to reallocate the funds or change the amount. We have a $175 million fiscal year amount that we can do. Does it carry over such that you could then appropriate over $200 million in 1 year? How would that work? In other words, you're freeing up cash, freeing up money that could go to other projects. And as the Senate President alluded to, there's strong demand. So what happens to those funds?
Statutorily, we can roll funds over.
Okay.
So it's 175 a year, but if for whatever reason we don't spend the 175, it can roll over. And so yes, these funds that have been released would be available, per the chair's discretion in future rounds.
I think that's helpful for the board to know.
Yep.
We good on this policy? Any more questions?
I'm
You
gonna
want to get to the
answer-
next slide?
I'm gonna
For
answer
sending
to
more?
the
Okay.
boards, yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I did have a question, Mr. Speaker, when you're ready.
Go ahead, Commissioner. Sorry, I can't see online, so my
Oh,
apologies.
that's all right. Thank you. I like this process, but my only concern is for whether or not there's consideration for the size of the not-for-profit, because sometimes some of those changes aren't necessarily due to the, I guess I'll just use the term that's been used, or the irresponsibility of the leadership, but that there are changes that need to be navigated that often smaller not-for-profits don't necessarily have the resources to navigate as deftly as larger ones do, just because of the difference in resources. Does this process take that into consideration?
It's a great great question, Commissioner. We feel like we have to draw the line somewhere. And so we think that 20% line does allow for a fair amount of wiggle room for projects to encounter unforeseen circumstances or, yeah, like you mentioned, just work through the difficulties of a complicated project. Anything more than 20%, and this is certainly up for discussion, but anything more than 20% feels like a different project from what was passed by this board. And out of respect for this board, we don't want to be building a project that's so significantly different from what everyone here approved.
Thank you.
Johnny, yeah, Mr. Doc.
If I could just jump in and contribute part of the response to that question, I want to give credit to the DECD staff for working extremely hard and overtime with all of the project applicants, both in the application stage and once they're awarded. So I think there's a significant amount of the commissioner's time, Matt's time, Melinda and the staff's time that goes into capacity building with the organizations that you just described, Commissioner. And so we don't sort of cold shoulder and shut the door in their face. They work very hard to make these projects that this board has endorsed a reality. And if they hit that 20% threshold, notwithstanding the assistance that's provided to them by the hardworking CIF staff, I think they deserve to be treated the same as a large organization with a similar threshold.
And I don't think it's unlike the State Bond Commission process. For example, I'll use the city of Hartford. If we applied for $5 million to revitalize Weathersfield Avenue, and the city called up and said, you know what, we're going to use the $5 million to now build housing units somewhere in another part of Hartford, nothing related to the Bond Commission approval, you wouldn't allow them to go forward. You'd have to have a change, Bond Commission approval. So I think it's important to point that out.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, just when you're applying this 20% rule, are there any other areas where you have a specific threshold where you are looking, for instance, when you're evaluating proposal, do you have a sort of a bright line regarding, say, soft costs being too much of a project that would cause the project to be either rejected or postponed. In other words, development fees of above a certain level, or non-capital expenditures above a certain level, or salaries above a certain level. Do you have percentage thresholds or dollar thresholds that you apply sort of in determining whether something gets green lighted or not? Because I noticed sometime in looking through the book of projects that's prepared and the comments on strengths and weaknesses, often it's pointed out that a project, one among the weaknesses is excessive developer fees or excessive non-capital expenditures. Is there a rule, a percentage rule that you apply in that?
So for the first pass at looking at the applications, when we're still in the application phase, we don't have bright lines on either soft costs or development costs. Those are both great examples of things we look hard at, but there are not bright lines. You've rightly pointed out that we do note to the board when it looks like it's above market, or it looks like it's too high for what would be typical. And we leave it to the board in those cases to assess whether maybe it's a project that really has so many merits that we're willing to pay a slightly higher soft cost percentage than typical. But those are two good examples of places where we are evaluating, but we don't have bright lines.
Good, thank you.
Okay, great. So just the last piece here is we've broken these projects into two groups. The first group we just talked about is before we've even signed a contract with DECD. The second is if we've already signed a contract with DECD, that would suggest that this project has started. We've started spending money. They've started construction. And so we're treating it slightly differently because we're working with them. We've presumably seen the track record. We've seen some progress. And so these projects, it's a slightly different process. You get the change request in, you get DECD review. Same thing, if it's non-substantial change, it comes to me for commissioner discretion. If it is a substantial change, this is where it differs from the page before. If it's a substantial change, this will always come to the board. If we're already working with a project, if it's in process and they come to us with a substantial change, either a funding gap or a 20% change in outcomes, we will bring that to the board. The theory being, these are folks that we're already hand in hand with, that we're down the path with. And so we just want to give the board that extra level of consideration of whether to continue forward with the change request or pull the funding.
Any more questions on the policy? Yes, Secretary of State Thomas.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. So if the contract has been executed, there's a substantial change and it's coming back to the board, what's the mechanism for that? Are you waiting for a regular meeting? And I'm just wondering how that plays into the annual allocations.
That's a good point. So it won't, in no case will the request be for more funding, because that's one of those headline rules that if you're asking for more funding, you have to put in a new application. So as it relates to funding, the cadence wouldn't matter as to when we see it, because this substantial change will not involve a new request for CIF funds. But it's a good point. We only have 4 meetings a year, so there is a chance that it could start to slow down projects if we're coming to the board for every substantial change. I would suggest we test it out, see how it works. And if we get to a place where we need special meetings, we can do that. My hope is we have so well discouraged people from having substantial changes that we don't have to have a preponderance of them at our meetings. But I say we cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, I think the final point too is when the law was drafted, I think there was a couple considerations that were strong considerations. One being that projects had to be endorsed by legislators, for example, right? So if you're having a major substantial change and you wrote a letter in support of a project, now it's completely different, right? It may go from housing to something else. And number two, there was the need to work hand in hand with cities and applicants. And so if they're making changes, I think that the board and the legislators who did that may not even know about those changes. And I think that's another reason why at least come back and brief everybody on that so they know what's going on. So yeah.
Well, I would propose, per Senator Duff's good question, I would propose that we add a component of this policy where we update the board every time we make a decision, like there's any commissioner discretion decision made on a project, and up to you. I don't know if you have an opinion as to whether that's real time or once a month or at the board.
Would you do it in writing?
Yeah, in writing,
7
for
days
sure.
of a decision or something like that? Does that work for everybody?
That's good.
Okay, so we'll have to amend it. So let's get to that in a second. Any more questions before we kind of move to final action here? No? All right, let's start with the amendment to the policy, right? So before we approve the change of request for the policy, you're asking that we make an amendment to it. The amendment would state something like the commissioner, we should not say something like, we should get it right. The commissioner, when the commissioner determines that an eligible project has undergone a substantial change, the commissioner will notify the full board in writing within 7 days of said decision. That sound close? Is there a motion for that amendment? Is there a second? There's a second. Any discussion on the amendment? All right, if not, let's vote on the amendment. All those in favor of this amendment, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? All right, the amendment is adopted. We now have a change of request policy as amended for adoption. Is there a motion? Commissioner, is there a second? Second from Representative Felipe. Any discussion on the amendment or the policy as amended? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, got too quick. Any opposed? All right, the policy is adopted as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4B, I know the majority leader needs to step out for this one.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to excuse myself to avoid a potential conflict of interest.
Okay, we'll give him a second to exit the room. Don't go far. And 4B, approval of CIF round 1 technical changes. Please.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So these are the two technical changes everybody can see in writing. So these are both round 1 awards, the City of New Haven's 596, 598 George Street project. So this was originally proposed to be, it's a historic home, 2-family home that was going to turn into 2 owner occupied units with a rental unit each. In terms of this moving forward, the city can't come up with a capital stack that allows this to move forward. So their proposal instead, so that they could access other sources of funding to complete their capital stack, is to change this into the historic rehabilitation and then into 5 to 8 affordable housing units, targeting specifically veterans for these units. So we still have the same number of units, but we need the technical change because of their usage. The second one is International Hartford. And this was for renovations to 681 Weathersfield Avenue for the construction of a year-round public food truck court. This is a project that, as they did additional due diligence on the site, environmentals came back and really exacerbated the budget. So the applicant has instead found a new location, and this new location allows for the project budget to move forward. They found other funding sources as well. And so we're doing the technical change request here because the location change. And the applicant would also like to reduce the amount of funds that they're receiving from $137,564 to $999,950.
Where is the project moving in Hartford?
I wish that I had that location. I didn't put it into the technical change. It is closer to the Trinity College campus. If we want to hold on this decision so that I can get the actual location, we can do that.
No, it's in the same vicinity.
It's in the same vicinity. It's still in the same neighborhood.
Do you know if there's site control and
They have site control.
NRZ approvals and things like that for the new location?
Do not know if there's NRZ approvals for the new location. There is site control. They're going to be leasing the site. Trinity College currently owns the site.
Okay. Sounds fine. Any other questions? All right. If not, we have a motion to approve these technical changes. All right, Senator Duff, and a second from Secretary of State Thomas. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any noes? Any nays? If not, those technical changes are approved. We can maybe let the majority leader back in if someone wants to tell them. We'll go to 4C. This is the round 3 application overview.
All right, very quick report here, Mr. Speaker. So in round 3, we had a total of 177 applications that were submitted. That was down a little bit from round 2. There were a total of 15 ineligible applications and 162 eligible applications requesting just over $620 million. So both came down from round 2, but still very healthy activity. Want to point out that in June, we talked about the 16 municipalities that had yet to submit a municipal application, and 9 of those 16 applied in round 3. So the outreach and engagement efforts that CIF staff is making a difference. So we'll continue to focus on these remaining communities. And then when we look at ineligible applications, these were up by about 3 times over what they were in round 2. And the majority of these 12 out of the 15 were all due to not following instructions around the project budget and the request. So they were requesting less money than CIF policy.
Thank you. With the, for those that were rejected for that reason, requesting less than policy, or were most of the rejected requests from nonprofits or from municipalities?
All of the ineligible applications came from nonprofits.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the application overview?
Mr. Speaker, I will
Commissioner.
be, yes, thank you. I will be recusing myself because there is a potential conflict with one of the applications, so I will not be participating in this process, in this part of the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Noted. All right, so there's no vote on 4C. So we have the overview. Now we'll be voting on 4D, which is CIF round 3 applications for funding attached to Schedule A. You'll see it in your packet. There's 21 applicants that are going to be awarded for a total of $101,347,638. I'm particularly pleased. I know there's some municipal officials here. The one that stands out for me, I'll move away. There's a big one in Bridgeport and Hartford, but I was reading the newspaper this summer, and the town of Windsor, I don't know if anybody's here from Windsor. I think I saw Representative Garibay. They had a whole planning session around these renovations to Wilson Park, community engagement, community meetings, and they just came up with this plan that was really organic. And that's exactly what this was meant to be. And I just think it's really great when you see communities buying into the process, and it's great that we can award the communities that do that. So that one stuck out for me. They're all great, obviously. I thought that was just a really nice article about how the town went about it. So any other questions or comments? Yes, Representative Candelora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, to that point, you know, when we review these summaries, I think sometimes, you know, when I looked at us doing this community investment fund originally, you know, you look at it as being something that's transformative for those communities that are eligible. And I think a lot of times, sometimes you have the advantage of meeting with individual applicants. You know, they will speak to us on the projects, and we have the advantage of knowing sort of what their long-term plans are for their communities. And when we look at these summaries, sometimes it jumps out at me that I don't get the big picture without calling out any particular projects on this list, but sort of what is sort of the community investment per se, you know, versus similar to a bond commission meeting, projects to renovate a facility. And I'm just wondering, is it something that DEC could look at and maybe discuss as sort of, you know, making that mission clear, and even to the applicants? I just worry about us going down a path of being a bond commission 2.0 as opposed to being a community investment fund. And it's not to be critical of these projects. I think by and large, the bulk of them have been great. But are there recommendations that DC could come up with to make sure that, you know, we're still fulfilling our missions? And I'm appreciative of, it's not lost on me, you know, you're recommending the changes to the change orders, because I think that plays into it as well. How baked are these projects? We want to make sure that they are shovel ready, but maybe looking at, you know, the scope of the design, you know, the actual total allocations, you know, do we go bigger and better in general to avoid the sort of non-impactful projects that could be better suited at a bond commission? I just put it out there, not to be critical of any particular projects, but wanting to make sure we keep focusing on what we want to fulfill. And I think it's not lost on me, you know, the chairman's comments about Windsor, you know, that is something great to hear. When you read the couple of sentences, the public might not realize what actually went into that planning. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, and then Senator McCory.
Sorry, happy to, just on a procedural level, happy to spend more time in our executive summaries talking about community impact. I think it is the first section, if I'm not mistaken, in our executive summaries talking about impact to the communities, but you're right, that is the mission here, and we can do a better job of spending time on that section. And then secondly, I would say I would encourage everyone here to drop in on one of Matt and his team's excellent webinars that go on in between sessions. And they say at the top of every single webinar, this is for transformational projects. Please send us your big stuff. Please send us your visionary stuff. And so we are really trying to get that message out there.
Thank you. Senator McCory.
Yeah, first, Commissioner, I want to thank you and your team for doing another outstanding job on working through these projects. I just want to add, it was asked earlier, how many projects were rejected from municipalities and how many were rejected from nonprofits. And that kind of concerned me, and I think we should start thinking, and I don't know if we're going to make change here, but start thinking how we differentiate, right? Because this is supposed to be community investment and transformational projects. But smaller projects, a smaller project in a community could transform a community in a way that we had never could be more impactful than a $10 million project downtown or in another community. So when we talk about community investments, I don't want us to be not necessarily dismissive, but we need to be aware of those smaller projects that can invest in the community. I know we want to make everything $1 million or more, but I think we have to be mindful of smaller projects that can be transformational for neighborhoods. Because if you want to build better communities, you start by neighborhoods. And maybe we need to find a way to package items that are between $1 million and $2 million that will be transformational for those individuals in those smallest nonprofits. Plus those, in my opinion, the small nonprofits move communities and neighborhoods much better than the larger ones. And we can't be dismissive of the fact that because they're small, they can't transform communities, neighborhoods the way we look at and the way this project's supposed to be, because it's not supposed to be bond gender 2.0. And I don't want us to go down that route. But if we're not looking at the small nonprofits, do not have the capacity and don't have the relationships and don't have the ability, the agency to communicate with those who make decisions, then my community and communities like mine, although they will get resources, it won't transform the neighborhood and community like I want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Majority Leader, Representative Rojas.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the commission and certainly DECD for their support on item number 3. Veterans Terrace is an example, I think, of a transformative project. Probably won't get on a lot of people's radar, but this is rehabilitating 150 units of barrack-style housing that was built in 1952, full of families right next to a park, right next to an elementary school. And to the point about presenting information, if you were to be able to share pictures of what it looks like before to what it looks like today, I think everybody in this room would agree that this is a transformative investment in housing for some of our most under-resourced neighbors. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Any other? Yes, Representative Felipe.
Just wanted to echo the thankfulness that folks have for DECD and the work that you've been doing, but also the board. I think from round 1 to round 3, we've really made a lot of steps to make this a better process. Those of us who were involved legislatively, creating this had a vision. And when you talk about Windsor, that's exactly what we're talking about. And I have to also think about the comments of the minority leader of the House, when we talk about putting this into scope. I think you're absolutely right. But I think we need to look with a wide lens. If you look at PSEG and Bridgeport, the demolition, how that's starting, for a lot of us, that's represented sickness, that's represented a lot of bad that's going on in our neighborhoods in terms of how it's affected our health, how it's affected noise pollution, how it's affected traffic. And we're now able to see that come down, hopefully build into something that can connect our harbor. This is the beginning of a project. Obviously, cleanup is going to be a lot more expensive, but this is how you begin to rebuild neighborhoods. And I want to thank everybody for having that vision and seeing it the way we do.
You Representative? Any more? Anyone want to tout their hometown project? Now's your last chance. If not, get your press releases ready. Okay. All right. All those in favor of the applications for funding for CIF round 3 as attached in Schedule A. Is there a motion, I should say? So moved. Second. Seconded by Representative Rojas, moved by Senate President Looney. Any discussion on it? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The funding is adopted as presented in Schedule A. We'll move on to agenda item 5. We should be done in a few minutes here. Reminder of next round timelines, round 4 and round 5. Mr. Police.
Thank you very much. So as we approved at the June board meeting, we will be issuing the notice of funding availability to the towns on Monday, October 16th, and applications will be due on Friday, December 15th. Tracking this through the normal kind of timeline that we've used the last several rounds, that means that we'll be transmitting the executive summaries to the board on Friday, February 9th in advance of the scheduled Tuesday, March 12th board meeting. And if we want to adjust that timeline at all, I know that's the first week of the session, I believe, in February, happy to look at that.
I think the February is a problem. March 12th is pretty close to the Big East basketball tournament, I think, but we'll take a look at that.
Hopefully we're not playing on Tuesday.
We will not be playing in the new Big East. That's correct. There's fewer teams now, so I suppose it's okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just following up on a point raised earlier by Senator McCrory, in terms of the notice of funding issue, the portal opens October 16th. You said notice is going out to municipalities. How do nonprofits within the eligible municipalities become aware of the process and the timelines? In other words, do they have to depend upon the municipality in which they're located, cluing them in as to what the process and timeline is, or how does a nonprofit who wants to participate in this become aware in order to present a timely application?
Great question. So what we've been doing is we do the formal notification to the chief municipal officer. We also notify the representatives and senators for that town so that as a team, they can work to communicate to nonprofits. We have built up a pretty robust mailing list. I think it's up to 800 different organizations and communities that we have. So it goes out through that. We're also using lots of different community partners that are tied into the nonprofit community. So for example, the United Way networks and the Community Foundation networks, they know a lot of the small and up and coming nonprofits. So they have been helping to get this information out. And then we also will be doing a webinar with the Connecticut Association of Nonprofits and this October, so that it's helping to just continue to reach nonprofits that aren't aware of this.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. I have one question on maybe not related to round 4 and round 5. The bond commission, right? We have to have that within 45 days of today, correct?
It's 60 days.
60. Okay. Got it. All right. So sometime soon. Okay. Any other questions on round 4 or round 5 timelines? Did you do round 5 already?
No, thank you. I didn't go
Okay.
through round 5. So round 5, we'd be opening the notice of funding on Monday, April 29th, with applications due on Friday, June 21st. We'll provide the board with materials on August 5th, and then this is in advance of the September 10th board meeting.
And so to the extent, going back to what we did in 4A, where we gave the discretion to the commissioner in some cases, or to reject based on substantial changes to the projects, to the extent there's funding that is now either back with the board for the next meeting, I think we should be aware of that when we do the next round of funding, right? Because that number could be 74 million or it could be larger, depending on what the actions of the board are. I think that's important to have.
Yeah, we'll have an updated if things get de-allotted by commissioner discretion, we will notify everyone per our new policy, and we'll have a running total that adds that to what's available.
Like, for example, there's $139,000
Yep,
available.
we just got that back today.
I think the legislature will very carefully consider all funding items that come before the board. So,
Excellent.
all right, anything else in 5? If not, for the good of the order, comments from board members, anything general, questions? Yes, Mr. Doc.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not strictly CIF related, but I want to take advantage of the fact that we have a lot of people here who help shape not only the CIF agendas, but also the broader bond commission agendas. We spent a lot of time earlier talking about the significant number of change requests and underfunding that we've received as part of the CIF process. And I want to emphasize to everybody that we are seeing those on items that have come through Urban Act as well. And I want to make a plea to you as people who help shape those requests to focus on the ones that are shovel ready. Focus on the ones that have bids in hand, because if they're not yet ready to go, one, my experience is they come back to us 12 or 18 months later and say, to accomplish what I told you I was going to accomplish, I need 50% more funding. And that funding might not be available, and I don't want them to have wasted their time. And I don't want them to have left a bad taste in the mouth of us or our agencies by feeling like we were deliberately lowballed and sandbagged. And second, there's a limited amount of space on every bond commission agenda. And if we're tying it up on projects that aren't going to have a shovel in the ground for 18 months, they're crowding out projects that are important to communities that could get underway today and take up space on that future agenda for the project when it's actually ready to go. So I just would ask each of you to carry the spirit of today's new policy for CIF into the request that you're bringing to us for other bond commission items. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Duly noted. Any other comments for the good of the order or questions? If not, I have a motion to adjourn. So moved by Senator Duff. Is there a second to adjourn? I think Senator McCory is going to second the adjournment. And we stand adjourned. We'll see everybody soon. Thank you.